In this video, we're going to learn how to draw a space scene like this one using Adobe Photoshop. I recently did a video like this on how to do it in Illustrator, and I wanted to make it for Photoshop. It's actually a lot easier to do in Photoshop than Illustrator. So let's get started. So the first thing that you need to do is open up a new document. So we'll go to File, New. And I'm having everybody in class do these 8.5 by 11 things because they work out really good if I want to put this in an art show for your project. So click on Letter, and orientation should be Landscape, and you can just name this Space. And the color mode, RGB, background contents, we can make this transparent, and all that, the rest of that you can leave default and say Create. First thing I should do is reset my workspace so that we're all looking at the same thing. So I'll reset to the Essentials default. I have my layers and I have properties and colors. So we're going to fill this background here with a black background. So the best way to do that is to go to Layer, New Fill Layer, and choose Solid Color. And we can just leave it at that, and you're going to choose black. If you're in here and you don't see black, just go down to the bottom and slide this all the way down to the bottom, and you will get a nice rich black, and say OK. Alright, so that is our outer space background, and we're going to add a new layer. So we can go over here and you can say new layer here. You can also go down here, click the plus, or layer, new layer, whichever way you prefer. And I'll just go ahead and name this one Sun. And we are going to get the brush tool and go up here and make sure the hardness is on 0. And make the size probably about 400. Nope, needs to be bigger. Yeah, make the size around 1000. And you're just going to go over here and pick a color that's kind of an orangey, an orange color like that, and you're going to go to the very center of the page and just click once and just make a little burst of orange like that. Now we're going to go in here and get a little bit more of a yellow color, and you're going to use your bracket keys to the right of your P on your keyboard to lower the size. By the way, if you don't see this circle here showing you what size your brush is, it might mean you have caps lock on. So when I have caps lock on, it doesn't show me that. So just turn caps lock off, and then you can see your brush adjustment size with the brackets. So I'm going to go in here and make a smaller one and click, and then one more time I'm going to get just a white color, and I'm going to make a really small white dot in the center of that. Alright, so that's going to be our sun off in the distance. So the next thing we're going to do is make some like rays coming out here, some sun rays. So we're going to make a new layer, and I'm going to call this rays, and I'm going to get this lasso tool right here. You can either use the regular lasso tool or the click and do the polygonal one. I'm going to show you how to do the lasso way, but they're both will work. So the lasso tool basically works the same way as the polygonal one was, as long as you hold the Alt key. So we're going to click a point and then hold Alt, and then that gives us a straight line, right? So we're going to go up here and make it, don't go straight up, just go a little bit of an angle, not too much. Click a point there, and then come back down and click there and let go. All right, I'm not sure if you've ever used the lasso tool that way. I'll show you how to do it with the polygonal lasso tool. It's pretty much the same way, except you don't have to hold the Alt key with that. So I'm just going to make this tall, spiky thing like that. Once you have that selected, you're going to fill that in with like the same color, orangey color that you have in your sun. So I picked that color over here, this orange, and I'm just going to say Edit Fill with the foreground color that I chose and say OK. And then Control D to deselect. Now what you want to do, I'm going to give you throw some quick keys at you, but this will make this go a lot quicker. So I'm going to do Control T I'm going to put that on top of my sun. And what I want to do is duplicate this layer. So the quick key for that is Control J. So now you see it made a copy of rays. And then we're going to do Control T, and I'm going to rotate it. Hold the Shift key so that it goes completely 180 degrees, and then slide that layer down there so you have a top and bottom sun ray. And then you're going to hold the Shift key, click both of those, and you're going to merge those together. That's Control E. By the way, these commands that I'm telling you, Control E and Control J, merge down is like merging two layers together. So that is there. And Control J is to duplicate a layer. So we're going to do that again. We're going to duplicate this rays layer. Control J. Then you're going to do Control T. Hold the Shift key so that you get another group of rays that are at a 90-degree angle. Press Enter or check mark. And then once again, we're going to group these two together. So hold the Shift key, click both of those, and do Control E to merge them together. And then do Control J to make a copy. Control T. This time we're going to rotate it about that much because you're going to do two more copies. So somewhere around there, probably about right there is good. And press the check mark or Enter. And then one more time. We're not going to merge these this time. We're just going to duplicate this one. Control J and then Control T and rotate that to kind of fill in that space there. Press the check mark. All right, now we're ready to shift click all three of those rays layers and do Control E so that they're all in one layer now. All right, and we're going to drag that behind the sun. And now we're going to give it a blur. So go to Filter and Blur, Gaussian Blur. And I have mine on like 27, 28. That should be a good amount right there. You can just move the slider to adjust it and say OK. And then the last thing we're going to do to the rays is just lower the opacity a little bit so that it's not too strong. Let's go over here to our layers, and I'm going to hold the Shift key and click on both of those layers, and let's get our layers palette organized. I'm going to do Control G to group and make those in a folder, and we're going to call this Sun. All right, so we are going to start the planets. Let's click this here and make a new layer. I'm going to call this planet Saturn and go over here to the elliptical marquee tool and click somewhere in this area is where we're going to build Saturn. So click here and hold the Shift key to keep it perfectly circular. Otherwise you'll have an egg-shaped planet. We don't want that. So draw a circle about that big, and we're just going to start filling it in with some color. So let's get our brush, and in fact, let's make it big. We can just go ahead and fill it in with that same orange color that we were using for the rays of sun, and let's go and get like a very light yellow color and make a big brush about like that. And hit it just 2 times. I just click 2 times right on the edge. And then I also want to get a white color and make the brush even smaller and hit it right there. All right, now let's put some shadows on here. So I'm going to go over here and get a darker orange. Say OK. And by the way, the brush size I'm using right now is 400. I am just going to brush along the edge of this to make a shadow. So what we're trying to do, the sun is over here, so this is the side of the planet that's going to be lit up the most. And then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to get a darker color, more like the shadow, a black color, because it's going to be really dark on that side. Okay, and you can just edit this by keep going back and forth and adding more blends to it. If you want the color to just be slightly on there, you can go over here to opacity. You can lower the brush opacity so it's not as strong as it might have been. All right, somewhere like that. That should work. All right, now I'm going to show you how to like add a kind of a texture to it so it just doesn't look super smooth. But we're going to need to make a new layer for that. So I'm going to click on here, get this new layer going, and I think that I guess that color will work, that same color. We're going to get a different brush this time. Go over here and get one of these speckly brushes here like this one. You can scroll down here and find one of these like Kyle's spatter brushes, and we're just going to go over here and click on the planet and just give it some speckles like that. And then we're going to give it a blur so that it looks like it's not just the speckles only. So go over here and go to filter, and let's go to blur. And we're going to do two different types of blurs. Let's do a motion blur. And make the angle, this controls the angle of the blur. Just kind of make it at a diagonal, something like that. And the distance, somewhere in the 83. So I have 56 for my angle and 83 pixels for my distance. It doesn't have to be exactly that, but that's what I have going on. And then say OK. And then again, go to Filter. This time we're going to go to Filter, Distort. Filter, Distort, and go to Spherize. Say OK. And you could just leave that all on the default and just say OK. And then that just kind of rounds it out so it looks like it's bending around the planet. All right, we can do Control D now. Well, actually, no, leave it selected because we're going to actually make another layer, and I'll show you what that's all about in a minute. We're going to have like this blue orb over here, so it's going to be casting kind of a blue thin shadow on the edge of that. So I want to paint that on a separate layer. Let's go grab a blue color. Something about like that should work. And don't forget to go back and change your brush to a regular brush now. We don't want any more spatter brushes. And let's just go on the see, I'm painting outside my circle. Don't paint in it, just paint it on the outside, and you can see that it gives you just the edge of it. Then you just want to kind of taper it off. And now we can do Control D and see how that looks. That looks pretty good. So to do the rings on this planet, make sure that your planet is not over here on the edge. If it is, you're going to have to move it. And since it consists of 3 layers, you'll have to hold your Shift key to click on all of them to make sure that when you move it, that you have all of them. We're going to group it when I'm done with the rings, but for now they're separate. So hold the Shift key to make sure that it's not over here, because you won't be able to have room to make your rings if it's not, you know, moved away from the page a little bit. All right, so we're going to need another layer. Let's click on this and make a new layer. You're going to get the elliptical marquee tool again. This time we're going to have like this squished oval looking shape. Probably something like that. If you don't get it centered, don't worry. You can just let go and use the arrow keys on your keyboard to slide it however you want. So that looks pretty good there. I'm going to just brush in colors with this. It doesn't matter what color you have right now because you're going to be changing that anyway. And then let's do Control D to deselect it. I want to make a copy of it, so I'm going to go over here to Layer 3 where I have that and do Control J. That duplicates it. And then I'm going to do something called Control I, which is invert. This is just so that it makes it a different color. So I just inverted the color so that it's different, and you'll see why I did that in a minute. So Control I to invert. Now Control T. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this ring smaller so that it fits in the inside of the other ring. And that's why I changed the color, so I could see what I was doing. All right, and you want it to be like this where it's kind of really thin up there and thicker out here in the front, because as it goes away in the back, it would be skinnier. And while that's still selected, you can go to select. Whoops, we got to press the check mark, sorry. Press the check mark, and then we want this to be selected. So go to Select, Load Selection. Okay, so now we have that inner oval selected, and we're going to go on back on layer 3. You can hide this actually, because we don't really need that anymore. It's really just so we could get the selection inside of here. Go to layer 3 and press Delete or Backspace on your keyboard, and then Control D. So we have the first ring. I'm going to make mine have like 2 rings, and then I'll show you how to make it go behind the planet there. So let's go ahead and click on that one and do Control J and Control T, and let's just make a smaller copy so that it goes just inside those other rings. Just makes it look a little bit cooler. And press Enter or check on your. So now we're going to merge those 2 things together. So hold the Shift key and click on both of those and do Control E to merge them. And we can just go ahead and throw this layer 3 away. We only needed it temporarily. So let's go ahead and name this one Rings. Whoops. Let's go ahead and name this one Rings. And now I'm going to show you how to make it go behind the planet right there. It's basically going to be a layer mask, which I have taught you all how to do before. Let's rotate these rings though before we do that. So while we have Control T enabled, pull it to the outside so you get the little rotating marks, and just kind of spin it at an angle like that, and then press the check mark. And I actually want to give this a little bit of a gradient on it too, instead of while we have it selected now. So let's go to Select, Load Selection again, and I just want to darken it in the back. So pull this down and get like a darker color so that it's almost black. And let's get a brush, soft brush. I have it at 284. I think I will bump it up around 600. And I want to just hit, notice how I'm not on the rings. I'm going just outside of it. And over here on the edge, I can get a little bit closer. But basically the rings would be, you know, getting darker back there, and they would be just bright out here in the front. So let's do Control D. All right, let's throw a layer mask on here. And what you need to do that is we need to like cut out where the planet is. So we're going to go back to where Saturn is, click on that layer, go to Select, Load Selection, and say OK. Now you're going to go up here to where it's rings, where the rings are, and go to Layer, Layer Mask, and Hide Selection. We want it to be hidden where the planet is. So go Hide Selection. We want that to be hidden there. So put Hide Selection, and then go over here to the Layer Mask, and notice how wherever it's black, it's hidden. Where it's white, you can see. So we want to paint some white right on that bottom of that planet. So let's get the brush. Let's make it a little smaller so we don't make a mistake. Probably around 100 is a good size brush. And just start painting white right there so it kind of lets us see through that layer mask. If you want to change the color of your rings, like if you picked a color and you think it looks weird, which that's what I'm thinking right now, go over to the left side. So remember, these 2 are linked. This is your layer mask. This is your actual layer. We're going to make an adjustment here on these. So I'm going to do Control U, which is Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation, Control U. And you can change the color with that. So you can move these sliders around and change it to be a different color. I think I'll leave mine like that. So before I group these, I'm going to move the texture that's in my Saturn planet. So I'm going to click on that and do Control T. I just kind of wanted my rings and that texture to be going at the same angle. I think that looks cool. And then I'm going to press the check mark. And now I'm going to group all these together. So hold the Shift key and click on those and do Control G to group. We can call this Saturn. All right, let's make another planet. So make a new layer here. And this one, we're going to get the elliptical tool and draw another planet. It'll end up being smaller later, but it's kind of good sometimes to draw them a little bit bigger and then reduce them. If you're making them really small, you don't really have the chance to enlarge them, and it's just easier to see the detail. So I recommend making your planets, somewhat bigger while you're working on them. And then we're going to go ahead and we can just fill that in with white, and then I'm going to make this planet look kind of like Earth. So I'm going to get some blue colors, not that color. Oops, I'm going to make my brush smaller. I want to leave kind of a white end on it, and let's make it a little darker. And a little darker still. And then we want it to fade more to a black, like that. And the black will be on the edge. So that's more of a royal blue. I really want it to fade to black on the very edge of it. Like this. All right, now if you have this thing where it looks really choppy like mine does, you can just go up to Filter and go to Blur and put a Gaussian blur on it, and then that will kind of blend the colors a little bit more so it doesn't look that way. It looks like it kind of blurred the edge of my planet a little bit, which I think that looks okay, but if you need to put that back, just go over here and spray some white on the very edge of it. All right, now I want to add some texture, something that looks kind of like Earth. This isn't going to be exactly Earth, but something similar to it. So I'm going to get this plus down there and make a new layer. And let's just get some color green and make some land masses. So something like that. And we can just get the brush tool and get a harder brush. We can do Control D, by the way. So now I'm going to show you how to kind of make some land masses and clouds on here. So let's go on our blue planet and say select load selection, unless you already have it selected still. But if you accidentally deselected it, that's how you can get it back. And we're going to make a new layer. And this is going to look really cheesy at first, but you'll see when we're done, it's not as bad as you might think. All right, so it's not really Earth, it's just an Earth-like planet. So what you want to do is get a brush, make the hardness 100% this time. I have size 45. And I want to get a green color, so let's go over here and choose a green, something like that, and just draw some kind of continents. This doesn't have to look really good. We're going to put a filter on it that distorts it, so as bad as this looks now, please know it won't look quite that bad when we're done with it. So just brush some blobs, continent looking things here, and then maybe go in and get a beige color for more of like a desert color and paint some blobs in there like that. All right, yeah, I know what you're thinking. This looks ridiculous, but it'll get better. All right, so we have some continents in there, some blobs. Let's go to Filter and go to Distort and choose Wave. Whoops, Distort, Wave, click that. And over here where it says number of generators, I have mine on like 13, somewhere like that. If you do too many, it's gonna look really weird. So somewhere in the 15 range, 13, 15. I have mine on 13, and these are all default settings right here. And just say okay. All right, so that kind of mixes it up a little bit, and then you're going to go to Filter, Distort, and do the sphere eyes again, and say okay for that. And whoops, while it's still selected, we're going to do the same thing, only we're going to paint some clouds on it. So let's make another layer. Let's grab white for our color, and you're going to do the same thing. Maybe some bigger spots for that. So we have some clouds on our planet. So we're going to go to Filter, Distort, and choose Wave. And again, we're going to bump this up to around, somewhere around 15 or 16. Say OK. And go to Filter, Distort, Spherize. And say OK. All right. And then let's go on layer 4 where we have our little land masses and change that to probably darken so that way it fades off the edge. And then we want to just kind of erase the clouds on the very edge. So we can get our eraser tool and let's get a soft brush and let's make it a pretty big brush, around 500. And actually I'm going to make it even bigger. I'm going to make 1,000 and just go around the edge so that you can't see the clouds that are over there. All right, now that doesn't look beautiful, but it's not bad for a quick Earth-like planet. So let's group these together. So hold the Shift key and get all those. Do Control G, and we'll call this Earth-like. And now let's make it smaller. I think it'll look better when it's smaller anyway. So do Control T and reduce it down like that. Maybe rotate it so that it's got the highlight and reflections at the right place. I think I'm going to lower the opacity on the clouds just a little bit. They're a little bit on the bright side. Same with the land masses. You can just lower the opacity a tad so it's kind of more of a subtle effect. I think that will help a bit. Now let's make a moon. So we have our Earth. Let's make another layer for moon. And once again, we're going to make it bigger than what we need because it looks better to draw it big and then just reduce it. When we're done, it's just going to be a real small next to the Earth. So we definitely don't need to make it look great. It's just easier to draw it bigger. So let's get just like a white brush, and definitely need a bigger brush. We need the hardness 0, and we need a big size. Color that in, and then let's reduce the size a little bit. And click on a little bit of a beigey color like that. And then let's get a grayer color. Actually, I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to click the color over here. Get some type of more of a gray color. And brush that in there. And then let's just go down the line, getting a little bit darker and darker each time until we get to black at the very end. Like that. And let's make a new layer. And now we're going to make some craters. Once again, these aren't going to look that good until we're done. They'll be good enough for what we're doing. So we need a hard brush for that. And let's reduce the size. And just, oops, we don't want them that color. Let's just make them kind of a little bit darker. And make them different spots. So use your bracket keys to the right of P to make them smaller and bigger. I know this is definitely cartoony looking, but it works, I think, for what we're doing here. It's good enough. And then let's go to, once again, to Distort, and we want to choose Spherize. Say OK. And we're going to lower the opacity on these a bit so that it's kind of more subtle. And let's get the eraser tool again and just kind of erase those ones that are in the back. All right, and now let's hold the Shift key and get both of those. Do Control G, and you can just say moon, and do Control T. And like I said, this is going to be small, so it really doesn't matter that it doesn't look like an amazing moon. It will be good enough at the size we're doing it. See how small it's going to be. And then you can rotate it to make it kind of point toward the sun a little bit more. Maybe we'll have it a little bit farther out like that. And then press the check mark. Right now we're ready to kind of make a horizon because we're going to be like standing on another planet looking out at the sky. So let's go to your background layer here and make a new layer so that it comes out right above your black background. If you started one somewhere else, don't forget you can always drag it and move it to where you want. And we'll just call this horizon. And we're going to get a brush. I have this, I want to get kind of an orangey gold color from our horizon. Get my brush tool. We want the hardness on 0. Let's make our brush 1000. And then if you go down to the very bottom of the page and hold your shift key while you paint this, because then it will make a perfectly straight line. So go over once and then back again like that. Maybe one more time. I'm going to bring it up just a tad. And then we're going to get a little bit of a darker color. So pull that down over here on the right where the color swatch is. Go to the very bottom of the page, hold the shift key. And we're just going to keep darkening this up and moving farther away from the horizon. Make the brush a little bit smaller on my last color and darken it like that. All right, so now we kind of have this hazy, foggy thing on the very bottom of our planet. And let's make another new layer. And I'm going to make like kind of just this swirly texture. So you can get your lasso tool to do that. This is fine. And just draw some squiggly lines like that. And let's fill it with a little bit of a brighter color. We might change that later. I'm going to get an orange color. Say edit, fill, and it's filling it with the foreground color. You can also choose the color there if you want. I'm going to put on foreground color and say OK. And I'm going to make some more of these. So just make some swirly little lines like that. Say edit, fill. Then you can do Control T and kind of just squish them. Oops, hold the Shift key. So go from the very bottom and hold the Shift key. Just kind of squish it up so that it makes it a little bit tighter. And then press the check mark. And then you're going to lower. You can try changing the opacity or the blending mode on here if you want. I'm going to put mine on overlay, and I'm going to lower the opacity so it's kind of just subtle. Kind of looks like some rivers or something that the sun's hitting. And now we are going to make another layer. We're going to make some mountains. So we're going to go on layer 9 here, and you can use your pen tool. So go over to pen tool right here. You can press P on your keyboard. Click on the pen tool and then go over to the edge. So what we're going to do is kind of draw some mountains that go up, and they're going to come down. So there's kind of like a valley and then back up here. So the pen tool is kind of like connect the dots. Just start on the edge of your page and just click some points. There's definitely nothing tricky to making these mountains. Sometimes people hate the pen tool in Photoshop, but in this case we're drawing something that's quite easy, so it's not too hard. So just click a bunch of points like this. Then we're going to go back up higher on the edge, kind of frame out our picture. And when you get to the edge of the page, just make a dot right there on the edge, go down to the bottom, click again. It's okay if you go a little bit outside of the image area, but just don't go to the inside. So, all right, so now we have this area selected. If you go over to your path window, which by the way, if it's not open, you can go over here to Window and click on Paths. So we're going to click that, then go over here to these little bars on the edge, click that, and we want to say Fill Path. And we can choose a color. And I'm going to get like an orange color, orangish red, say OK. And let's go and click off of that. So you don't want those points selected anymore. So when you're done making your path, click just down here to unselect it. If you click that, you'll see there's a blue line and it selects it. We don't want it anymore. So just click off of the path. And let's go back to layers. Now we're going to duplicate this layer. So click on it and do Control J. And we're going to change this to a black. But before we do that, well, let's go ahead and change it to black. So do Control U, which is Hue and Saturation. You can do that under Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation. And we're going to just slide this all the way over and make it black. Then you're going to get the Move tool. And that's going to select those mountains. And then use the arrow keys on your keyboard and just click down just a couple times. I did it 3 times. I wouldn't do it more than 5. And that just gives a little edge. You know, the mountains have like a little bit of glow from the sun shining on it. And then press Enter. So let's group these. So click on layer 9 and the horizon of those 4 layers and do Control G. We'll just call it ground. So let's open up that ground layer and add another layer inside of it. We're going to pull this one behind those 2 mountains because we want to have some other rocks and mountains that are down here, like in this valley. So you can just use your lasso tool again and just draw some rough shapes that look like mountains. Make it flat on the bottom. And we can just fill those in with any color for now. We can switch it later. And then, let's see, I want that one to actually be on a different layer. So I'm going to copy that one, delete it, and paste so it can be on a separate layer. So I can move that one independently from the other ones. And we're going to use Control U, and you can darken it. I'm going to desaturate it a little bit. And then you're going to lower the opacity on some of them so you can kind of see through them a little bit. Same thing with these. Control U. I'm going to darken them a bit, desaturate them, lighten the opacity some. And I'm going to duplicate this one here, Control J, just so I'm lazy. I don't have to draw anymore. I'm going to pull it behind all those and do Control T. And I'm trying to flip this around. If you want to flip it to go to the other side, hold the Shift key and go right here. And it's almost like a door opening. You can flip it to the other side, and then you can hold the Shift key like this if you want to like flatten it out a little bit. And I want this one to be lighter. And you can change the opacity again on these. So the ones that are off in the distance are a little bit lighter. And do Control T and hold the Shift key on these two and kind of scrunch them down so they're not too tall. I'm going to Control J those, Control T, edit, transform, flip horizontal, just so we have some going the other way. Just kind of layer these on top of each other. It just makes the ground look a little bit more interesting that way. Control U, I'm going to darken those a little bit since they're more in the foreground. And then that one that's in the very background over here, I'm going to lighten the opacity on that one a little bit more. and move it. Make a duplicate of it. Control J and then Control T. And I'm going to kind of just move it over here in the back. All right, so that's good enough just to make the ground look a little bit more interesting. Now let's go and finish up. We have the ground. Let's go add some stars and some things over here in the sky. So I'm going to make a new layer for that. Let's pull it behind the ground so that it's the, whoops. Let's make this new layer and drag it over here underneath the ground group and right above the background. If you accidentally drag it in the ground group, just pull it back out of there and make it back here. All right, so let's see, what should we do first? Let's do the blue kind of orb thing that's over here that's giving that glow to the Saturn planet. So we want to click on our colors and let's find a nice blue color. We're going to make it light at first. Well, I'm sorry, we're going to make it a little bit darker at first. Something like that. And let's get our brush tool. Make sure it's on a soft brush and click just like one time. And then you're going to do that thing where you did, just like when we made the sun, use the bracket keys on your P or next to the P on your keyboard. And this time let's lighten that blue up. Make kind of a smaller dot in the middle. That's good enough like that for our orb. So now that makes sense that you have that blue glow on Saturn because you kind of have that glowing orb thing. All right, let's make some stars. We can do it on the same layer. This time let's just get white. And for our brush size, we're going to go really small. And I would say make the hardness kind of in the middle on these. Don't make it fully 100%, but somewhere in the middle is probably fine. And the first stars I make, I'm going to make them 12. And you're just going to click randomly on your page and make a bunch of stars. Now, what you should do when you're making stars is to change their width. So have some big and small. So I'm going to use my bracket keys to bump it down to a smaller brush. And then paint some small ones. Most of them should be pretty small, but it just looks good to have a couple that are bigger too. And even smaller, some that are just super, super faint, you can hardly see them. All right, that looks pretty good. One more thing before we wrap this up is I'm going to show you how to make like some comets that are coming out from the side. So let's make a new layer for those comets. Again, we're going to use the lasso tool, and I'm going to hold let's use the polygonal one. It's probably a little easier. Use the polygonal lasso tool, and you're going to draw just like we did on the sun ray, you're going to draw like these triangles. So you're going to start down here, go up about that far, and make this little skinny, skinny triangle, and close it off like that. See how it gives me that circle when I get to the end? That's what we want. Do that, and we're going to go ahead and we can brush in the color that we used for our, actually back up on that. Once you have it selected, let's get our brush tool, put it on the softness or 0% hardness, and get a bigger brush, somewhere like around 250, somewhere around 400. And brush the end of it. You don't want to go all the way to the end, just like kind of from the middle back. Make sure it's real. You do it heavily there, and then it's just going to kind of fade off. You can do Control D for a second to see how that looks. All right, so that looks pretty good. And I'm going to do Control J to copy it, and Control T. We're going to make a copy of it, and we're going to hold the Shift key. And right there in that middle point, hold the Shift key and just pull this out. So we have like a really long comet tail next to the shorter one, kind of like this. I'm going to use my Move tool to scoot it over a little bit. And that's probably good enough. So I'm going to take these two layers that I just made, do Control E to merge them. And then let's do Control T and rotate them. So, whoa, we don't want to do that. Click on the object to move it. So we're going to move it over here, and let's make it smaller. So go by the corner and make it really small. And you can press the check mark when you're done. Get the eraser and kind of just erase the edge of that. I don't like how it looks like a ball on the end. I think that looks fine. One other thing that might look kind of cool on this is if we go to Filter, Blur, and go to Motion Blur. If you make this, like right now you can't even see it. The distance needs to be much less. So let's make it like 100. You need this line right there to be going at the same angle that you have your comet. So notice how I have this line right here. It's kind of matching the same angle that we did that. And then you can play around with the distance, how far you want it to blur. Not too much, otherwise it looks a little bit weird. And if you don't have the right angle, there you go, 40 was perfect for mine. You need to have the angle really lined up with it. You don't have to do this part. I just thought it looked a little bit better to do that. And let's do Control T again and make it a little smaller and press Enter. And then I'm going to do Control T and angle it a little different. We'll have it coming down here and press the check mark. And I'm just going to duplicate that a couple times. So Control J, Control T. Make another copy of it, kind of like there's a meteor shower. Make these a little smaller. Control J, Control T. There we go. All right, so we're pretty much done with this. I want to show you one other little last trick that I think you guys might enjoy trying on your final art. So click on the very top layer. So we're going to apply something called an adjustment layer. And these are pretty cool things that you can do. Go to Layer and go to New Adjustment Layer. Now you're welcome to experiment with all these, like photo filter is a good one. I'm going to show you a couple of them. So let's try hue and saturation. We'll just say OK to that. And what that did, it opened up this panel above the layers that you can make edits to. So let's say I want to change the color of my art. I can just pull this slider here and I can experiment with completely different color versions of my art without really having to do any work. So that's a fun one to play around with. If you don't like the color of your art, just go up there and make an adjustment layer and you can get some really cool things. And you can also experiment with them. So let's say you're not really sure you like that, you can do the opacity change so that it's kind of a subtle change. So you can lower the opacity on this adjustment layer, or you can turn it off and try some other ones. Do it again, go Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and let's try Photo Filter. You'll see it made this filter up here, and you can try some different photo filters. If you want it to be more significant, you can just pull the density up. So that's another one you can try. I think that the hue and saturation is a pretty cool one. So when you're done with everything and you try that out, if you want to leave one of these on, you can. Make sure that you type your name on the bottom right-hand side of the artwork, and then make sure you go File, Save, and then do File, Save a Copy, and make a JPEG. And that JPEG is what you'll put in your website portfolio.